Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.
Special meeting of the SVUESD. The first agenda item is public comment, but I don't see any members of the public here to make comment, so we'll move directly into agenda item 2. So Director Gordon, the floor is again yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So just a presentation that I wanted to provide to the board and the public. Of ESSER money. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. This is a document that has been posted with tonight's agenda. So at the beginning, I have a list of acronyms, and I apologize. I do use HVAC quite frequently because it just kind of rolls off the tongue, but HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. So you will hear me say that quite a bit. And then the ARP ESSER, you guys are probably sick of hearing us say this, but ARP is the American Rescue Plan, ESSER, Elementary and Secondary School Relief Fund. But again, these acronyms are just here for reference. So ARP ESSER or ESSER 3 is a significant amount of money that we have coming into the SU. And there are some requirements with it. The first of which, we have to set aside a minimum of 20% of those funds to be used to address learning loss. So with that, we also have 14 categories of allowable uses of these funds. And I'm not going to go through and read all of these. This is the same as it has been, but they have given us category 13 and 14 for the later ESSERs. So essentially with the money that we've been allocated through the Agency of Education, we have to look at what's allowable. We have to build applications with narratives and budgets and submit that to the agency for their review. They look at all the data that we upload and then determine if it meets the intent of what these funds are being given to us for. And if it does, they give us approval, and then we can continue on with our investments. So with the ARP ESSER money, again, 20% of it's going to be set aside for learning loss. But a big portion of it we're hoping to be able to use to address our facilities and our some construction projects. Another thing to note about these funds is they are currently available, but they have to be expended by September 30th of 2024. Any funds that are unspent will then be returned to the federal government. So what we're planning to do, we have to continue, the employment of the folks that we've hired through ESSER 2. So I have a list of here for you to reference, and we've mentioned these before in some of our other board meetings. In addition to that, we're going to continue initiatives that we have funded through ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 that aren't necessarily related to employment, but some of them are actually contracts. One of which is a contracted service for nursing to help support our existing nurses. And then also the project manager that the SCU hired a number of months ago is actually helping to facilitate this work. So both of those contracts are funded through ESSER 1. So we'll continue that. So those investments have to be moved into ESSER 3. So we've estimated that and some of the other initiatives at about $1 million. So the approach that we've undertaken to kind of look at how we're going to use this money, besides what we've already started through ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, was referring to a document that the agency issued in April of last year entitled A Strong and Healthy Year, Facilities and HVAC Considerations. So there's just a brief summary of items here, 1 through 8 in the report that kind of summarize some of the key points that document outlined. Indoor air temperatures between 68 and 78 degrees, relative humidity not exceeding 60%. We know, in some of our buildings, the temperature can exceed 80, sometimes 90 degrees in, June, or sometimes, when school starts in August and September. And we know that the humidity levels sometimes are far in excess of 60%. So there's some other items here about the ventilation, managing indoor air quality, testing and balancing. So as we started looking at our buildings, project manager was referring heavily to this document to think about what should we be looking at to try to accomplish with this money for the buildings that we have in the SVUESD. So I tasked him with meeting with all of the facilities managers and school administrators. He toured all of the school buildings, sometimes went to the school building more than once, had follow-up discussions with administrators and project managers as needed, and started to assemble, the list of what are the things that, our teams identified as potential uses of these funds. At the same time he was generating that list, he started putting together some very general costs. These are just either square foot costs or unit costs to give us a rough idea as to what we might be looking at for budget numbers, because as we get a little bit further down, you'll see we're going to have to submit that to the agency very early on in the process. As he was working through the potential projects, the AOE rolled out a school facilities inventory that they required us to complete in December. So I was very thankful that we had the project manager on board, and he was able to assist all of our facilities managers in getting that completed and documented, uploaded back to the agency. So we just further have a good idea of where we are with our existing buildings. And now the state will have that as well going forward. So once he assembled all of the potential projects, we said, okay, how are we going to prioritize these? And during one of the meetings that the Agency of Education holds, they hold weekly meetings for administration. They're called Coffee and Conversations. It was suggested that you look at projects and kind of assign them categories. So that's what we did. We looked at assigning tier 1 as kind of the base of, optimizing our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning in our buildings. And that would include things like, making sure that all the buildings are covered with proper ventilation, making sure the filters are where they need to be, which, we did a lot of that through, when COVID hit initially. But there still could be some spots in some buildings that need attention. Looking at potentially indoor air quality monitoring systems, making sure that the existing systems and any upgrades are tested and balanced appropriately so they're working, to the optimal levels. Those buildings that have building management systems or automation systems, making sure that they're updated and operating, to their highest potential as well. And then this also includes, for the most part, air conditioning throughout most of all, or I think it's actually all schools. I'd have to go back through, but he broke it out by school, and that is our goal, is for tier 1 to be able to address all of these things that would really kind of hit upon what the agency outlined in that guidance document from April of last year. We kind of skipped tier 2 and looked at tier 3 with some of the projects that we weren't sure if we were going to have enough money to do them. I think space was a big issue, but we know that we're probably not going to have enough money to put additions on buildings. So we assigned tier 3 to those that we weren't sure if we would have enough money. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to craft the projects so that they would meet the intent of the use of these funds. So we assigned those, and then anything that kind of fell in between ended up in a tier 2 project. So he took those tiered lists back to the facilities managers and just asked them to confirm, and that is kind of where we are today. So the allocation for the SVSU just shy of $16 million, with that 20% set aside. It's about $3 million we have to use for learning loss. And then we're estimating other staffing and initiatives from ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 to continue on for that final year at about $1 million. So that leaves us about 11.6 available. And then we tried to determine what would be the most equitable way to kind of break this money out between all of the schools that we have in the SU. You may notice I don't have BVSU and the Arlington schools listed here. Their allocation actually came in separately. So I've kept them out of this equation. The SVSU allocation came before BVSU joined us. So this is the amount of money to cover the 8 schools that we have prior to Arlington and Fisher joining us. So we looked at what we had for student counts as of December 1 and kind of just broke that $11.6 million out, allocating it proportionately by the number of students in our buildings. So with that, we basically just, took the money and split it to each building that I have down here in this lower section and started looking at, okay, so if we were to just try to tackle tier 1, so that the HVAC optimization in each of our buildings, you can see we've kind of got it the same for each building here. So the second line is always going to be the HVAC optimization ranging, Bennington $943,000, so on and so forth. One item that did make it into tier 1 is this. I'd like to point out right here is an allowance for an elevator at Bennington Elementary. We know right now that we've had students that haven't been able to access classrooms because of injuries. They haven't been able to get up to the 2nd floor. So it's imperative, that we make that whole building accessible. And if I scroll back up for just a quick second, one of the allowable uses is number 2 here. So Individuals with Disabilities Act, that is going to be the angle that we're going to try to work the elevator in. So it's going to make our building accessible for everyone. So that's the lens that we're going to present to the Agency of Education for that project. So that is really probably the only tier 1 that really doesn't fit into that HVAC, the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning bucket. So if we just look at the tier 1, and again, that does include the elevator, that comes to about $4.35 million. And these, again, are just really rough costs that our project manager put together. And our project manager is actually a certified cost estimator as well. So, he's well versed in this type of work. What we are going to have to do is once we get approvals on these projects, we're actually going to have to get them designed by an engineering firm and then put those out to bid to actually get contractors to do the work. So we need to factor those costs in as well. So that's what this line is right here. The 20% soft costs and contingency, that would be our design costs of, getting engineers or perhaps an architect for the elevator work. And then a contingency, we really won't know what the costs are until we actually have plans and specifications that we can have contractors bid on. So just building a little bit of a cushion in there. So that total comes to about 5.2. The SVUESD allocation is 4.9. So we're a little shy right now, but there are certainly things that we can tweak. We'll go ahead and submit all of these projects to the agency and see if they all pass. And then we're going to have to kind of go through a deciding, matrix as to what's going to get done. But that is the goal at this point, is to go ahead and present all these tier 1 projects to the agency. And at this point, we're opening this up for public and stakeholder feedback. We're going to go ahead and start submitting the projects for concept approval. So that's the first hurdle that we have to get through with the agency. We have to give them a narrative as to what the project is going to be. We have to give them a cost estimate. And then we also have to identify what the anticipated funding is. We're at this point going to say all the funding is going to be coming through ARP-ESSER, and we'll be using the square footage or unit costs that our project manager has identified, and he'll help us develop the narratives to go ahead and submit these concept approvals. So as the agency is reviewing those projects, we can start doing some legwork and making sure that any work in any of our buildings that are flagged for potential historic preservation review, we can get that process started. And then if there were anything that was going to flag, an Act 250 review, which again, if we're not changing the footprint of the building, we should be fine. An Agency of Natural Resources, if anything were to flag that, we could start kind of walking through those processes as well. So hopefully we will get concept approval from the agency, and that is really kind of our green light go. We will have the project manager go ahead and develop requests for proposals based on the scope of work for all the projects we're looking to do. He's going to go ahead and facilitate putting that out to bid to engineering firms. He'll work to get all those proposals back and to make the recommendation to administration and to the boards to actually award those contracts. And with that, we'll go ahead and get our permits and then hopefully break ground. Again, all of this has to be done by September 30th of 2024. So we do have a lot of work to tackle over the next several months. And again, because we focus so heavily on these projects through the lens of that document that the agency provided, we're hoping, that there shouldn't be any issue with getting them approved at the concept level, and then once we actually go through for construction. So just wanted to share where we were, how we got here, and what our next steps are going to be. And that is it.
So Director Gordon, a few quick questions that come to my mind, and just for clarity, so the money, you said the money needs to be spent by September 2024. Does that mean the projects need to be done by 2024, or simply that the checks need to be cut by that time?
Both, because we would want to make sure that that final check is written and the money is expended, because once the clock strikes September 30th of 24, the money disappears.
And so my second question is that realistic? Given the scope of the work that you just outlined, is that doable, given whether it's supply chain issues, whether it's labor, finding the people who are qualified to do this kind of work? Because every school district in Vermont is going to be looking for these same materials and these same people to do the work. So does that seem doable?
We won't really know what's going on, with the industry until we get our plans and specs out there for bid.
Okay.
But I think I'm hopeful that we have, really good working relationships with a number of contractors. And, if we're able to package these kind of, if we put all the SVUESD projects together, it might be a big enough project that will get bigger organizations to bid on from other areas, which then may sub out to our local contractors. So that might, give us a little bit more wiggle room too. That's what we were talking about, is how are we going to package these to make them more doable in the time we have ahead of us.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Gordon? Dick, please go ahead.
Well, I've got a couple of observations and a couple of questions. One of the things we're paying the price for is lack of preventive maintenance over the course of years on these things. Most of my career has been spent on air movement to make buildings healthy, and without that, you end up with situations where students can't learn and sick building syndrome. So I guess I'm wondering a couple of issues. One is, of course, once we design this, we have to continue preventive maintenance according to manufacturer's recommendations for the equipment that's installed. We have to do that. But the other thing is, how much funding will the AOE consider for this? Yeah, I know they aren't giving us anything, but isn't that a lobbying effort that's worth it? They have school districts all over Vermont that are unhealthy buildings at the moment. Is there any chance they're considering any funding support for this beyond ESSER?
So we're hoping that the ARP ESSER money will get our projects designed and built, and then we're going to have to deal with the ongoing maintenance, which we will, factor into our local budgets. But I'm speculating, and I don't know if anybody is more up on what's going on with the legislative session right now, but I think with the school facilities inventory that they forced us to do at the 11th hour, like right before the holiday break, I think they're getting ready to look at, really how old are our schools. And and Jerry can attest to this because I know he spent probably hours with Mike Briggs going through this, how detailed they really wanted everything identified, like your roofing system, your heating system. They had to go through everything and identify that. So I think that they're trying to, again, basically build this huge catalog that perhaps if the legislature then does roll out some type of construction fund going forward, they'll be able to refer back to this and say, oh yeah, this school, the facilities inventories, noted that this was really something that needed to be addressed within the next 5 years. Again, that's completely speculation on my part, but sorry, I don't have a better answer.
That's a good answer.
Yeah. When we're looking at these, Renee, are we looking at possible, because I look at some of the age of the buildings, put a $400,000 elevator system into Bennell. How long is that building be around for? Is there a way to, look at, can we pull the infrastructures out afterwards? Because, I'd hate to put an elevator in and find out Bennell is, needs to be replaced in 5 years. So that just seems like a huge waste of money. So are we looking at, can we pull things out after the projects are done?
I think if we were to be looking at new construction, we'd be in a totally different place.
Yeah.
It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. Like if we were going to just build like one mega elementary school district, one elementary school. Jerry's worked hard. The other facilities managers have, worked hard to try to keep, the buildings up. We know that the Bennington elementary schools went through their energy upgrades not too long ago. So and even Shaftesbury, I think, is really ahead of the game with, putting an air conditioning system in. You've got all new ductwork in that building. So that's going to be like, hopefully just check the box, ready to go. But I hope that we won't be in the situation where we would be looking to have to build a new school, and that we're able to maintain. And of course, when the engineers come in to start looking to design these, they're going to make sure that we have the appropriate electrical loads. And, if we have to put equipment on the roof, they're going to have structural engineers looking at that to make sure that we can accommodate it. So we'll be rolling everything in to make sure that we can sustain the systems that we're putting in.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Director Gordon?
Well, I'm just impressed that she's able to speak to all the different angles of building construction when we actually thought she was a finance person.
I worked for an architectural firm for 16 years before I came here. So this is my former life.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Director Gordon, if that exhausts your report, that exhausts our agenda for the evening.
Yep.
So
nothing actionable tonight. Just merely wanted to share the information as to where we were, and we're going to go ahead and start popping these into the agency to see what we can get for approvals.
Very good. All right then. Well, in that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
A second.
So Dick first, Jeff second. Any discussion about adjourning? Hearing none. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Nope, the motion carries and we are adjourned. All right.
Cat TV is celebrating 30 years of community media. Help support Cat TV's next 30 years by becoming a member today. Your membership will help us continue covering meaningful, local content. Thank you for supporting your local community media station.